Hi, and welcome to the British Library Food Season, supported by Mila, as you just saw, and this is day 2 of the Food Season's big weekend. Yesterday we had 8 events all through the day, and I think some of you were here all day yesterday, which is just lovely to see you come back for day 2. We have another packed schedule. I should say who I am. I'm Angela. I'm the co-director of the Food Season. This is a conversation about American food and exploring what American food is and all the different sort of ins and outs of that. And with glorious timing, Felicity Cloake is just about to bring out a book on that exact subject. So she was our obvious choice as chair for this. It's not even out what the book, we have the book for sale downstairs, but when's it actually out?
It's out on Thursday, but as you say, advanced copy is very exciting.
And this is the very first event Felicity is doing for Peachtree at Lobster Lane. Felicity is a food writer, cookbook writer. Her How to Make the Perfect column in The Guardian is a huge resource of reliability for so many of us. And she's been doing these wonderful cycling, traveloguing, food exploring adventures of France and UK, and then the most recent one being America. So it's going to be an absolutely terrific conversation. We're here for an hour, questions at the end, so you will get a chance to ask something of these guys too. We have Kayla Stewart joining us on screen. It's very early where she is, so we're very grateful. It's Kayla. But for now, over to you, Felicity.
Thank you. I'm so excited, A, because this is the first time that I'm talking about the book, except endlessly online, for which I apologise, but also because having spent 3 months going around the US eating continuously, I am still just an enthusiastic amateur in comparison with the company we have today. We've got Tom, we've got Desiree, we've got Kayla hopefully popping up at some point. It's very early in Texas, so very privileged. But these guys are either lifelong or decades-long experts on American food, so I'm very, very excited to hear what they have to say about it. Would you guys mind just quickly introducing yourselves?
Of course, yeah.
Your credentials.
I'm Tom. I run a business called Decatur. Some of you may have tried our food in the past, but we basically, I've been cooking Cajun and Creole food in London for the past, I mean, it must be 11 years now, and have been an enthusiastic lover of American food and American food culture since living there in 2011 to 2013. And sort of was very honoured to be invited to come and talk today, because I think it's American food's reputation in the UK is not particularly brilliant, but it's such an incredible cuisine with so much nuance that deserves so much respect and respect that we give to many European cuisines and cuisines from across the States. And I think you know, to shine a light on that today is going to be really interesting. But yeah, I've been cooking Cajun Creole food here for a long time, adapting things to British ingredients, bringing things over in backpacks, you know, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, and we're based over in East London. So
excellent. I am Desiree Burch. I am a comedian. I think that you can see my credentials about American food. I'm an enthusiastic participant in enjoying American cuisine. I am originally from Los Angeles, so when people ask what I miss about America, I tell them Mexican food. Not that there isn't any here, but it's rare to find, like, you know, properly seasoned, the correct ingredients, not freestyling and adding marinara sauce and corn where it doesn't need to be kinds of versions of it. You know, yes, no matter how many times everyone's like, there's a good bagel here, I'm like, it's still not as good as the Zuckers from the Upper West Side, you know? Or like, literally, when people ask, where should I go in America? I go to New Orleans. Like, you know, that Cajun food is maybe some of the best cuisine I've ever had in my life. All of my peak food, my sort of death row meal were from a place that no longer exists, Maurepas, which was in Louisiana, in New Orleans, that literally I was like, oh, I could die tonight, and I've lived a complete life. And I've never, you know, like I'd never quite experienced that, but all of my biggest peak experiences with food, as well as things that you're just like, well, I'm visiting my parents back in California, so I'm gonna stop out from the airport, go to an In-N-Out, have the In-N-Out burger to say I did it, you know, but like, it is it is something that I'm very joyful and enthusiastic about, and I will complain endlessly about things that I miss, but we can save that for the rest of the discussion. I'm just here to add a little bit of lightheartedness and personal perspective on some of this.
Can I ask you very quickly before we come to Kayla, the death row meal that you had that is no longer available, so no one can
no.
What was it that you were eating?
Okay, I do remember that the main involved goat tacos, which was, and I at that point had never had goat before, so I was just like, oh, why not? But it was just like, it was that to like the cocktail that like just had the right amount of like spice and heat around the rim with the salt of it, and I was just like, how are they doing all of this? I remember the goat taco, and I have to like go back because I look at the receipt that we photographed afterward. No, we all walked out and we're just like, what? There were 6 of us, we ordered everything on the menu that they had. It was a really bespoke, like limited menu. Every single thing was out of the park. And so like, just like aim for the fences and shoot the moon. And that's what I appreciate about a lot of American cuisine is that you can find some stuff that you're just like, okay, whatever. Like it's gonna, look, Waffle House is gonna be open, right? And so like, and part of it is the comfort of knowing exactly what you're going to get no matter where you go. But you can also have that experience where you're just like, this is life altering, and why doesn't everybody, it just makes you nuts, yeah.
Thank you. Kayla, would you like to follow that up?
I don't know that there's a way to, but I'll try. Hello, everyone. Saying hello from West Texas. My name is Kayla Stewart, and I will first say that I am calling both in the morning and with a slightly strained voice, so please forgive me. But I am a James Beard Award-winning food and travel journalist, a cookbook author, originally from Houston, Texas. I am also senior editor at a publication called Eater. So some of you guys may be familiar with Eater. We used to have a London outlet, actually, back in the day. But I essentially write and learn about food and dining culture in the United States and around the world. So I've written for a number of publications in the United States. I've also written for The Guardian, and I'm currently in a city called Marfa that is known in Texas. It's a small town that has a very like specific, distinctive artistic culture. And I am traveling through West Texas because I am writing a cookbook, the first of which about African-American foodways in the state of Texas. So I know a lot about American food and the really great things about American food, including tacos that are made properly. And a lot of my work is actually about specifically learning about the histories of those food, learning about the political, economic, and other elements that essentially interact with food and impact what we're eating, how we're eating, where food moves, how it moves, and why. So that's why I'm here today. I have quite a few opinions about food that I would be really thrilled to get into. It sounds like everyone on the panel, we all have some shared opinions about how we like our cuisine. And I should say, I actually am living in New Orleans now. So this restaurant makes me super excited for when I am able to actually visit London in person. So yeah, thank you guys for having me.
I feel like we're so privileged to have you. Thank you so much. I want to start by asking you quite a simple, potentially deceptively simple question. When you think of American food, what does American cuisine mean to you? What does that statement suggest? Is there a dish that sums up American cuisine for you?
I mean, okay. Look, I try to, like, the first thing that pops up is probably what's in everyone's head, which is just like fast food, drive-through, and I'm trying to kind of go past that because obviously that's been, although, it does feel like, I feel like Mitch Hedberg had a joke about, like, I went to a Subway, felt like the American embassy in another, but like if you see a McDonald's, you see it, you're just like, I know what this is. You have to welcome me here, right? You just walk in. But beyond that, I feel like, if I go, okay, I go like, what is the sort of Thanksgiving or Christmas meal that you think of as like, okay, that's the sort of ubiquitous, usually no matter what your culture is, you might be on one of those days doing something relatively similar with a turkey or a ham or something like that. But like, you know, because I've lived only on the edges, you know, like I think of either some kind of Mexican food or like a pizza, you know, which I know like literally come from other nations, but like, of course, you know, and that's a lot about American cuisine, but obviously, you know, any Mexican food that you have in the United States is going to be somewhat different to what you're going to get if you go to Mexico. And pizza for sure is different, you know, anywhere else than what you're getting when, you know, I lived in New York for 13 years, and so I have an idea of what pizza is and what it is not, for sure. You know, that like my boyfriend who's from Cyprus doesn't have, and he'll just hack into it like a serial killer. And I'm like, no, that's not how you cut it. And he doesn't know how to use a pizza cutter. And then he'll put ketchup on it. And I'm like, this is over, you know? So like, you know, I get really, I'm just like, look, there are certain things that I know, and I know that this came from another place, but like, we know how to do it. So sorry. So like, you know, so like, I think, you know, amongst other things, like if it's about a slice of pizza, like New York can be like, look, we understand this, and you can talk about Chicago, but forget that. And I know.
Yeah.
Well, look, I know Chicago deep dish is delicious, but it is like a whole pastry, like it's a whole casserole.
You say that like it's a bad thing. Cheese pie is an amazing
That is,
thing.
yes, but to me, in my head, I've got a different, you know, and I'm willing to die on that hill.
Okay, good. I appreciate your commitment. I actually think that's one of the most fun things about, or not fun, but one of the most underrated things about American cuisine, that people say, you know, pizza, it's Italian. Yeah, it's Italian, but it's also American in the sense that it's completely different, and the same with a lot of Mexican food. Like, that is the joy of American food.
Yeah, and the rivalries that come up between, you know, or if you talk about who's got the best barbecue, and it's widely, it's like, oh, Kansas City barbecue, but then other people will be like, forget that stuff, you know, like, like I do enjoy the rivalries about like who's got the best barbecue, who's got the best slice, who's got the best burrito, you know.
I love the fact there are strong opinions. It's actually a bit like Italy. Tom, what would you say sums up American cuisine?
I guess I come at it from a different angle, not being American. I lived in the States for a short while, but you know, you posed a few of these questions to us before we arrived, and I got a chance to really think about what American cuisine meant to be. And I really think there isn't. I mean, there are dishes that feel like they tell the story of American cuisine, like a gumbo tells the story of so much migration. It tells the story of West Africans being enslaved and being brought to Louisiana with pockets full of gombo seeds or okra plant seeds, planting them, creating something out of very little, and combining that with some French technique influence or German sausages with filet powder that was grown like on the land in Louisiana by Choctaw Indians. There's dishes that sort of define American food to me in what they stand for, but American cuisine is, I mean, how do you define a cuisine when the country is the size of Europe? If you asked, I mean, unless you're on MasterChef where you can just have an Asian sauce on things, but, you know, like in Europe, you would never say what is European cuisine, because the cuisine of the mountainous regions of Europe and the cuisine of the Mediterranean and the cuisine of the North and France, and it's, you know, they're so varied and different. And to me, American cuisine is that. You know, what is being cooked with the influence of Cubans in Miami is very different to what is being cooked with Germanic influence in Wisconsin. And so what is American cuisine? Well, I also think American cuisine really tells the story of America and capitalism and the need for, I don't know, it's such a nuanced cuisine that to define it with one dish is very difficult. But yeah, the kind of underlying theme to me is there has always been a level of sort of profiteering informing some of what American cuisine is. So if we look back to the slave trade, the reason that the slave trade happened was so people could make money, and they brought people over, and those influences came over, whether they were people like the French coming to Louisiana, or the Spanish coming to Louisiana, or the British, or the West Africans that were brought over, or the Haitians, and that changed and manipulated the cuisine. And then, it's such a varied cuisine that having just one dish and one idea of it is very reductive. But also, when I talk about capitalism, the selling of America overseas has been in this kind of quite defined small way, which to a UK or a British or a European or an Asian audience, you might only look at American cuisine as a burger and a hot dog because McDonald's grew and went overseas and expanded. But there is so much more to it. And so that to me, it's a nuanced, complicated, complex cuisine, and it's highly regional. And we look at French and Italian cuisine. You might go somewhere that has the dishes of Emilia Romagna somewhere in London, and everyone's saying, "Oh, this is more pugliese than Emilia." But you don't do that in the UK. It's an American place, it's a burger place.
Yeah.
And barbecue and stuff is a great example of that. You have such a regional, Kansas City to Carolina to Texas. They're all so complex and so complicated that my main takeaway from running Decatur for 10 years is that, put some respect on American cuisine's name, put some respect on Cajun and Creole food's name, because they are complicated and complex, and there's so much to delve behind each of those dishes. When I think about American cuisine, I think about this huge place, and there are defining dishes from all different regions. It's a complex place, as we know, a complex country, and a very complex cuisine.
And if there was a common thread, maybe it's the idea that as with sort of Cajun and Creole food, or particularly Creole food, as you say, it's got all of these influences, but particularly from West Africa and Caribbean. And then you've got fried chicken that was originally very much a sort of African-American dish, and etc. And a lot of dishes that have become American on the world stage have become American on the world stage through Western European origin people taking them and sort of flattening them for an international consumption audience.
Yeah, I think so, but also Americans flattening them to make an easily sellable product across the
No, but what I mean is Americans of Western European origin.
Oh, yeah, of course,
because people often say, oh, Creole, it's very French food. It's like, well, it's not entirely very French food. No. The people that were cooking it often were African American in these New Orleans restaurants. So I found that very fascinating. You look beyond like one layer down, and you realise that actually the truth is not as simple as being marketed abroad. No, it's. I mean, each story, fried chicken, if you pull the thread of, why fried chicken was sold or why fried chicken became popular, is because it was something that was hardy and could be taken on long journeys where black people couldn't get served in restaurants. And so, there's so much nuance and history to each of those dishes. To see American food being reduced to a dirty fried chicken sandwich feels insulting sometimes to me to look at it, because there's more nuance to it than that. But it's a complicated place. It is. Kayla, sorry. I feel like you've been sitting there very patiently while we've been ranting.
No. I think these conversations, well, first I'll say I certainly am one. When I first traveled to Europe in college, like a lot of American kids do, I absolutely made a beeline to the McDonald's in Paris as soon as I saw that golden arch. So I am certainly not one to turn down an excellent dollar hamburger. However, exactly to what you all were talking about, I think that the challenge with American food, the perception of it, was very interesting when I was reached out to by this panel, because my immediate thought was, American food has a bad rep, not the food that I know. And it's because I am not traditionally eating, and I did not traditionally grow up in a home where I was eating fast food on a regular basis, or that was my interpretation of American food. So exactly what Tom raised and what you all raised, for me in particular, being African-American, my American food story is very specific and very distinctive and very attached to the forced migration story that is also specific to my history and heritage. So going back, just describing my roots a little bit. So my actual dish is also what Tom's is as well. Gumbo would be my dish. And to give you guys some context around why that is, So I grew up in Texas, and my parents are from Louisiana, which is next door to the state of Texas. This is where Creole and Cajun food is birthed. My parents are literally from the region where you're finding they are an hour out for that. The city that they're from is an hour out from New Orleans, which is a very well-known town. People ask me where my favorite place to eat on earth is. I've eaten in Italy, I've eaten in France, I've eaten in Brazil, I've eaten many places that I adore and have outstanding food. To this day, I say and I stand by, New Orleans is the best place in the world to eat. It is a food city. It is a food capital. They have done things with food that no other place has done. And those specific abilities and the creativity that you see in New Orleans food comes from the West Africans that were forced onto southern lands of the United States and came from the Native American and indigenous folks that were already on that land. And knew how to harvest the land and knew the ingredients that were abundant and rich in American soil. And those were combined with the French techniques and the French techniques that were picked up by way of the French and Spanish colonization. So I tell folks I kind of have a Rolodex and a collection of favorite dishes, all of which are Creole and Cajun. So gumbo is one of them. Jambalaya is another. And that was actually one of my first favorite food stories. Jambalaya is a really interesting dish because it is a one-pot rice dish, seafood heavy, like most dishes in New Orleans, because you're right there on the Gulf. Gulf of Mexico specifically,
thank
guys.
you.
We still
I
call
was
it that.
waiting
It's
to see if
the Gulf of, just. I just want to clarify that some things are happening in America, and I want to make sure that you guys understand that we know that we have some specific thoughts on the things that are happening in America. It's the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes.
So beautiful and abundant bounties that come from the people of color that have made America the vibrant and beautiful and diverse and colorful place that it is, and allowing us to offer the cultural exports that we have around the world. So all of that to say, I tell folks to really make sure, there's a lot of, and I want to say there's a lot of charm to these fast food places, and I don't want to put those down either. I have friends that grew up in very different homes. There are people that actually rely on fast food places because they're cheaper. That's an entirely different conversation about some of the access issues and food access issues and pricing in the United States. But all that to say, America has charm in all of the different places that it provides, including its chain restaurants that are sometimes ridiculous and sometimes over the top and may not be the healthiest or, the most refined per se form of cooking. But we have our cultural traditions as well. And those cultural traditions are absolutely birthed out of particularly the southern region in the United States, where the slave trade absolutely was its strongest, and where so many West African migrants really developed the foundational roots of American cooking. And so what you guys might see as, American kind of soul food and Southern cuisine, cornbread, collard greens, yams, fried chicken that you guys were talking about, all of these things, they're not comical food. They're not foods to make fun of America. These are foods that allowed people to survive and thrive, but also that they're very proud of. And when these foods are absolutely made in ways that are elegant and refined and beautiful throughout restaurants across the United States. One I will recommend is the Gray in Savannah, if you guys are ever in the southern part of the United States. But yes, again, all of that to say, there's some really beautiful cuisines here. The one that has touched me most is the one that has to do with my family story. And I think that is often the case for most Americans, is that they will tell you that their favorite dish in some way connects to their roots, connects to their heritage, connects to the environment that they grew up with. And it's one of the things that I think, of course, is absolutely the pride and joy of America, despite kind of what we are seeing currently in our politics.
You mentioned Native American food, Kayla. One of the things that I was really looking for on my travels, but found it very difficult to find. And I know that there's an amazing restaurant in Minnesota, which unfortunately, America being quite big, I couldn't cycle to Minnesota on my travels. But it's very difficult to find anyone that is cooking in a mainstream way, anything that is Native American food, or doing anything more than using ingredients that obviously, so many iconic American ingredients, from, corn to cranberries to turkey. All of these things are ingredients that would have been used by Native Americans pre-colonization. But why is it that it's so difficult to find?
Yeah, again, and that's why so much of my food work connects to history. And, and food is fun. It absolutely is. But food is very political and food is also connected to history. And I think you see that in such a specific way in the Native American population in the United States. So much of what Native American culture has become and the way it is expressed in the United States is due to the policies that were enacted in the United States that impacted Native Americans. So you had so many different tribes and so many different groups that were moved to different places, that were reshuffled to different places, that were put on reservations. One of the most well-known Native American dishes called fry bread. That dish, it's essentially flour and sort of essentially for what it is, it's fry bread, and essentially was created out of ingredients given to Native Americans who were forced off their lands and essentially forced to survive very harsh climates and very difficult situations by the European colonists. And so that dish has a lot of controversy for Native Americans. Some see it as a dish that represents their resilience and survival. Some see it as a dish that represents the really harsh conditions and sort of the forced labor migration that happened. And those conversations absolutely come up in Native American cuisine. And so all of that to say, when Native Americans were forcefully migrated and were put through these conditions, their food wasn't appreciated. And while they were the ones harvesting the land and giving us all of these incredible produce, incredible meats, incredible game, the idea of Native American cuisine, was completely just ignored by white European colonists. And so it's taken time for Native American chefs to rebuild knowledge and rebuild understanding about what their cuisine is and also what it can be. That being said, there has been some really beautiful progress. One chef that I will note, Sean Sherman, who owns a restaurant called Awamni in Minneapolis, which is also called the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And it's an outstanding restaurant. It's one of James Beard. They have been nominated for several awards. Sean is indigenous. He and his partner essentially have created a fine dining tasting table Native American menu, and it's phenomenal. There's crawfish, there's corn, there's cranberries, there's wild rice, and he really makes an effort to not only create just these fantastic and divine and delicious dishes. I mean, I'm sitting here at a tasting menu restaurant, like sucking on a crawfish tail. So, it's a place where you can absolutely, like, you want to be fancy, but also like Sean lets you enjoy your food. And that's the kind of place you kind of enjoy in the United States. And he and others are starting to do that as well. In Houston, just outside of Houston, which is in Southeast Texas, there's a town called Kemah, and there's a chef called David Skinner. And at his restaurant, he has multiple restaurants where he's doing pre-colonial Thai food, pre-colonial Choctaw food, which is his tribe, and essentially really showcasing and demonstrating these incredible ingredients with like live fire techniques. He's roasting things in front of you. He's burning a sage stick with almond paste and pesto. I mean, you're eating just phenomenal, unreal bites of food and also getting history about the Trail of Tears. And I think that that's a really beautiful way to serve people an incredible meal, allow them to have a great experience, and also to remember and understand how this food got here and why it matters that we're talking about it and eating it today.
Yeah, one of the things that I discovered when I started looking into it is also the problem with reservations being food deserts very commonly, and this fry bread, etc., having this diet of, say, government cheese and fry bread really having had such a negative effect on the health of Native American people, and how much healthier, when there have been programs to try and reinstitute traditional foodways, how much that has improved both the health mentally and physically of the people. And it just seems like such a, until recently, untalked about phenomenon. It should be such a enormous part of American history. I don't know if you guys have come across any interesting ingredients or chefs.
If you kind of look at the way that that those lands were divided up and owned, given own or taken ownership of by colonists in the American South, I think that sort of tells the story, doesn't it? If you don't respect the existing indigenous food culture there. But I thought it was interesting to sort of hear what you were saying, Kayla, about some of those dishes. And there's also an idea that the Native American cuisine is obviously going to be incredibly different depending on where you were settled. So the Choctaw cuisine, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on, the more northern the parts of the American cuisine, but certainly the Choctaw cuisine, you can see the way that some of those items of produce and techniques and stuff are used in modern Creole and Cajun cookery even today. Whether
you mentioned the filet powder.
Yeah, filet powder, which is the ground leaf of the sassafras tree, is a traditional thickening agent for a gumbo. Has this kind of, I love this word, mucilaginous kind of property that okra has when it cooks, and it thickens up a stew. It almost has to me, a kind of somewhere between a bay leaf and a green tea flavour. Yeah. But that gumbo, and it's called gumbo filet now. If you buy it in the store, it's called gumbo filet. And that, is essentially a carryover from Native American cooking. And so things like cornbread, that started with dried cornmeal and pone bread being made pre-colonization as a staple. Corn grits, same thing. So to sort of, like I say, the nuance of American cuisine is layers and layers and layers deep. Yeah, it's a very interesting cuisine to see those sort of threads, and I would, the restaurants that you mentioned sound incredible in terms of sort of really stripping that all the way back to see what those diets were like. I think if you look at the diets of the Choctaw people, like it's wild hogs and squashes and beans, and that's what we celebrate in maybe more traditional Mexican cuisine, perhaps, and look down our nose at with American cuisine, despite most of America being Mexico at some point. That sort of dividing line of border, I don't know, there's, we were saying there's a kind of a snobbishness or, because American culture is so pervasive worldwide, there's a snobbishness when it comes to looking at American food in the same way as our brash little cousin, that, why would we respect it? All we know of it is fast food. Yeah. But actually there is so much history to delve into there. And it's super, it's super interesting.
Yeah, why do you think that American cuisine does have such a bad reputation internationally? With all due apologies, I assume that you're aware, unfortunately, of this.
High fructose corn syrup.
Is it I feel like it's food? Just. Is it the?
I mean, I feel like part of it is the fact that it like we have put commercially sugar in everything. Like I wish, like I'm listening to your story, Kayla, and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd had that upbringing with like rich traditions, aside from like some of the Mexican ones, which were there. I remember like my mom would make enchiladas for like the class dish or whatever, and it's like I still to this day will always feel like that's like a home, dish. But other than that, I grew up on Costco. Like that was, I had two working parents who were never home. I grew up eating what I could make in a microwave because I was a latchkey kid of the 80s. And so I think that, part of that reputation is the capitalism. Like it's, the best thing about something is always the worst thing, and part of what I'm hearing and what I've experienced is that like, even if we're talking about a dish like gumbo or anything that's, Creole or Cajun food, it's like, even if you put, a West African chef, a French chef, a Spanish chef, a Choctaw chef, like you couldn't get the same thing without the sort of pressure cooker of the story of survival, that specifically led through certain kinds of times and over certain sort of landscapes. And I think that what gets put out there into the world is more about the sort of, the capitalism factor, the commodification of certain things just to sort of reduce it, put a bunch of sugar in it so it lasts forever. And I mean, in America, like, there is so much less regulation. I look at the back of things trying to do a sugar cleanse and I can't buy anything because there's sugar and stuff that it doesn't make any sense for sugar to be in there. And I think that's part of the sort of negative legacy is like what, everyone who goes, everyone when I speak to, British people who go, and they're like, oh, I had some of the best food of my life or whatever, and I came back 5 pounds heavier at least, of course, every time, because, that it's just part of the ingredients that, as you were saying before, sometimes a local ingredient has to go to Monsanto before it arrives at the place next door.
Yeah.
And
it's the abundance as well. I think that the thing that really struck me is that a lot of these cuisines, they may have started off somewhere else, but then they've been supersized both in terms of the literal size of the thing on a plate, but more interestingly, there's always like the meat portion is bigger, or everything is richer just because you could do it in the States.
And often it's also, not that I feel like dumbed down reduces this too much, but it's, it favors a premium cut or a premium product in place of something that maybe would be more traditional. So you're gonna find when you kind of push things through the filter of modern American cuisine or modern American palates, it's the chicken's always chicken breast. It's always prime rib. It's always fillet steak. It's not the kind of maybe the traditional way that say it's Tex-Mex food. Tex-Mex food is kind of a long way away from what you might find on the streets of Mexico City because it's gone through that filter. Yeah,
and also because it's not the food of Mexico City, it's the food of the border region and etc. Yeah. But someone said to me in San Antonio, a Tex-Mex restaurateur said, I don't have an abuela in Mexico because my family had been here 200 years, but it's kind of the way she was describing it was as people describe cucina povera in Italy. And that gets sort of held up as this amazing River Cafe can sell a plate of tomato pasta for 30 quid. But, great. I mean, it's great tomato pasta, I'm sure. But when we're talking about, say, Tex-Mex food, oh, that's inauthentic. And so they were just trying to bulk it out with the ingredients that were available to feed their families. And it's just that sort of sneeriness coming from, it's not just Britain, you go to France. And has anyone ever had a French taco here? That isn't a problem. Has anyone ever had a French taco?
What do they put in a French taco?
You wouldn't recognise it as a taco.
Okay.
It's something entirely, it's just like, wow.
But there's that sort of idea, I think, speaking as a Brit looking at American culture, I think there's always been a snobbishness as looking at America as this kind of brash cousin because they, whether we like it or not, British culture has been inflected by American culture for the last 100 years because America's been this giant superpower that has released the movies and the TV shows and the music and the food. And I think, you also sort of bringing it back to food. If you look at the way that, it happens with all cuisines. It's happened with Chinese, Italian, Spanish cuisine in the UK. The simplest idea is the one that travels the easiest across an ocean into the country. So for us to understand it, a burger and fries and a hot dog, that's a simpler thing. And then you build up, and when you couple that with the pervasiveness of American culture in the UK, it sort of creates this situation where people go, oh, well, that's all that American food is. And that's all that American culture is. And I think, we have to sort of hold our hands up that they're kind of, the bright lights and the kind of the brashness perceived by
the glamour of it. I mean, I can't deny that still we think that we're over the idea that American food is very glamorous and we're not the kind of people in the 1970s going, oh my God, wimpy, this is amazing. But
what exactly is a White Castle anyway?
With those tiny burgers, what are they about? But it's, that is the flip side. It's glamorous, but also because it's been simplified, we're not actually getting the full picture. We're judging, on a very small sample size.
I reckon it's like, we can reduce the sort of like capitalistic sort of, simplification side, but the capitalism is built on all of these stories of oppression that actually give you the richness of the food, but it's uncomfortable to look at how the great food got great.
Yeah. Why do you think it's got a bad reputation?
I will use that to actually come back to why I'm traveling right now. So as we brought up, the United States is massive, and Texas is one of the largest states outside of Alaska. It is so massive. I'm not exactly sure what the scale is in Europe, but I'm
I think
positive
it's
several
about
European
twice the
countries
size of
fit.
France.
Exactly, yes.
So
And
big.
so it's a massive place. I am driving across it.
I was
I'm
going to
seeing
say it
parts of
takes like
Texas that-
3 days to drive through or something if you go.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it is. So I'm seeing parts of Texas I have never seen. I'm born and raised here, and this is north. So to give you some context, Houston is here. The rest of Texas is here. So I'm in this part of Texas. Most Houstonians, most folks from that part of Texas don't see this part of the state because it is at least 10 hours to get out here. And so you are in this one trip, in this one state, researching specifically African American food. I have been exposed to so much diversity and so many new and interesting dishes and so many different ways of cooking and so many different preparations of dishes that I grew up with. And I am seeing this because we're looking at just different regions. It is extremely hard when you already have that diversity and then you're trying to push back on telling that story of diversity. And so there's a huge part of Black food culture, and this is both in Texas but outside of Texas. So barbecue is a huge part of American culture. It's something most folks know and recognize when they come to the United States. American barbecue is absolutely associated with the white American male in the West with his cowboy hat and drinking his whiskey. Most people do not know that barbecue is here because of Latin American and indigenous techniques that were born out of the Caribbean and Central America, and African Americans that were grilling, roasting, and cooking over fire, live fire during the slave trade. So barbecue, what we know as American barbecue, actually is born out of African American enslaved folks. And that story doesn't get told. That story is not known by most folks. It's not known by most Americans for that matter. And so you're talking about a country that has spent much of its very young history spending so much time oppressing other people and forcing other people to not speak their language, to try and push out every element and representation of culture, and to force people to assimilate, on top of also the game of capitalism, which absolutely benefits from those processes. And so, you know, when you're talking about taking American food, what is American food? Why does it have such a bad rep? American food is so many different things because there are so many different people in the United States, but it's getting wrapped up in the soul burger and hot dog, and not even the best one, because there are some good burgers and hot dogs that are around here.
Can confirm.
There are some outstanding burgers and hot dogs in the United States. But we're getting the cheapest one that reaches the lowest common denominator and is meant to do that. It's meant to do that because it sells quickly, it's easy to explain, and it's easy to put something on there that is easily marketable and doesn't have to go into the long and complex and difficult story of American history. So, you know, all of that to say, when I am traveling in other parts of the world, when I am in Europe and having food conversations with folks in Italy, in London, in France, I am talking about, you know, what I am seeing in a place like Texas where I'm exposed to soul food, tacos, Tex-Mex, increasingly and largely outstanding Southeast Asian cuisine as more and more Asian American immigrants continue spreading their imprint across the Texas foodways. It's incredible. If you go somewhere like Seattle, you're going to see a ton of fish. You're going to see specific populations of Asian American immigrants. You're not going to see as much soul food. If you go to New York, you're going to see everything. You know, you're in all these different places that have this different food. And again, trying to replicate that is very difficult. And now you're talking about we're in a different sort of time period in the United States. So I think it's up to us to figure out, how do we tell this really beautiful story that we know exists and communicate that to ourselves and then communicate it to the rest of the world?
I think it's also quite interesting just thinking about what you were saying in terms of the way that American food has infiltrated other cultures, because you often sort of hear about diaspora cuisines in places, whether it's London, New York, wherever. If you're moving, let's take Vietnamese food, for example, or maybe Thai food, that's a simpler one. If you're moving to the States from Thailand in the hope of kind of finding this American dream, and you didn't have access whenever it was you moved to all of those indigenous Thai ingredients, you used what was available and you created something that became palatable for the local audience. So you put
Sugar.
Sugar and ketchup and whatever in to make your pad thai sauce, and then it evolved. And people, I think, see cuisines like that, and we look at it here, say with like Cantonese, like traditional British Chinese food, and people start to look at those cuisines, and they're saying, oh, there's so much more behind those cuisines, and there's so much more nuance to such a big country like China. But because the way that American food got here wasn't because Americans came to London to start a better life and had to. Yeah. It kind of came with big business. I wonder whether we don't ask ourselves the question about what's behind that. Yeah. Because this is the thing that they are selling to us rather than the thing that is being made out of circumstance. And so as an audience of consumers of American culture, maybe there's not that kind of intrigue that you get with some of those other cuisines that, you know that maybe the sweet and sour chicken that you're getting from the noodle place on Oxford Street is not the representation of what people in like Chengdu are eating today. Yeah. But perhaps because that American culture is so pervasive, we don't ask ourselves that question as a nation or as a consumer, because we're just like, well, they've sold this to us. This must be their best shit.
I think. And in fact, they're keeping it to themselves. I think that generally we don't do ourselves any favours when we don't ask any questions about America. We just swallow the top line cartoon fast food international version when there's so much more to it.
And then you have Kennedy Fried Chicken, which isn't a thing.
There's one near me that is somewhere that definitely doesn't do fried chicken. There's something like Minneapolis Fried Chicken. And
there's so many places where I'm like, they're not known for their fried chicken there.
Well, the Kennedys.
Just like but no one had taken the name, so you've got to go with that. Very quickly, because we're going to go to audience questions in a second. But if I can slightly put you on the spot here, and I will answer first. To bring it back to the cartoonish nature of American food that we've just been dismissing, where is the best burger you've ever eaten in America? And I'm going to say mine was, and if you don't like burgers, that's okay to say too. I don't know if we can be friends, but that's fine. Mine was at the Ringside in Columbus, Ohio, and it was because everyone had been serving me smash burgers. I did not do smash burgers. I don't want a thin, crispy burger. I want to taste that beef. And it was it was about this thick, and it just had a bit of American cheese, which in general I'm not down with, but I accepted in this, and then some tomato and just a proper bun, and that was it. And it was so delicious. Burger fans? Kayla, have you eaten a good burger recently? You can say McDonald's.
I was gonna say it would be very difficult for me to pick the best burger I've had.
No one's gonna hold it, you two.
I've had so many. Yeah. And I'm from Texas, guys. I'm sorry. I've had so many burgers. But what I will say, I have had some really great burgers recently, one of which is from a place called Burger Chan in Houston, Texas. And I will shout out that place in part because in addition to it being a great burger, I think it also showed where we are in American cuisine. Burger Chan is Asian American owned. And so you get to, essentially, it's a place in Houston. It has started to blossom into a chain. I believe they have 3 or 4 locations now in the city. But you essentially get to go up there. You get a checklist at the beginning and get to choose your sauces, your toppings, even the type of bun that you want. So you get to customize your burger order, and those sauces and spices and various toppings are all from the Asian diaspora. And so what I think is really beautiful about that, it's a true quintessential Texas beef burger. It's huge. You've got your cheese, you've got your bun, you've got your traditional elements of what a burger is, but you also have these Asian influences. And to give you a bit more context about Houston, Houston received a very large group of Vietnamese refugees during the 1970s. And so ever since then, the Asian American population across different Asian American groups has just steadily increased in Houston. And I think this is a really beautiful and really illustrative example of what American cuisine is, and particularly what it has become. It really is a fusion. It's a marker of the traditional American sort of the smoke and grill outdoor barbecue with the guy with his cowboy hat. but now the person wearing the cowboy hat might be a Cambodian American immigrant in LA. It might be an Egyptian halal pitmaster in Austin. It might be this East Asian American team working to bring Asian American flavors to burgers. And they do it really well at Burger Chan. I always get mine with a fried egg, but that's just me.
That's really good.
Good rec.
Kayla,
Good rec.
did I see on your Instagram you just went to an Ethiopian barbecue place that was serving barbecue on injera with everything? Is that
Oh
right?
my God, amazing.
Yes, thank you
That's
for
really
bringing that up,
cool.
because if you guys are ever in Texas, Dallas Fort Worth is in about it's sort of central Texas roughly, but it's in there. There's a place that is outstanding. It has blown away even the most old school of Texas barbecue food critics. It is a couple. They are the woman in the couple is Ethiopian American immigrant, and her husband is African American, so from the United States. He grew up in a pitmaster family. When she immigrated here, they met and got married. They essentially put their flavors together, and now they have a smokehouse in Texas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and you can get it's literally a Tex-Mex Ethiopian plate. And so
Oh my God.
Wow.
And
what Tom is
need to come
referencing,
back.
you gotta go. It is absolutely, I tell you, it is worth the flight to Texas. It is some of
I
the
was
most
gonna
outstanding
say-
barbecue I've had in my life. And I'm talking about literally, you have a plate of injera covered with ribs, Dorawat, Gomen, fried okra, mac and cheese, Texas toast. It's just incredible.
Okay, we're going,
Every
right?
dish is
Yeah.
amazing.
Well,
Yeah.
Dallas-Fort
So-
Worth is a hub airport if you're flying elsewhere. It is. It's worth extending your layover, leaving, getting food, and then coming back to finish your leg. Yeah, for that.
Amazing. Very quickly, burgers before we go to the audience.
Best burger. I racked my brain. I think probably the best burger I've eaten is a place called Hodad's in San Diego. I like keeping it fairly straightforward with a burger. I'm not interested in all the affectations of piled high with extra meat and things like that. But the one thing that they do, they braise down their bacon, so it becomes almost like not quite a pulled meat, but it's falling apart. And then they chill it, and I think they either stamp it out or they form it into a little puck. And so they fry the bacon. A thin puck. They fry the bacon as if it's almost like another burger patty.
Yeah.
So you have your burger, and then you have almost like a bacon crispy patty on top of it, rather than the strips.
Yeah.
And that was pretty sensational.
Okay.
I was also, it was 15 years ago, and I was probably very hungover on a tour, playing with a band, so it hit the spot at the time.
Yeah.
Interested. Would try.
Yeah, I wish I hadn't gone last because my answers are going to be garbage. And also I can't tell how much my answers are like infused with nostalgia, because the best burger is a burger I had 20 years ago. And usually probably. I mean, it's either probably happened in New York or San Francisco because they're huge foodie towns, and like most of the food you get there is really great. I haven't been to a lot of places in Texas to know how great stuff is there. And then I'm also kind of like, a lot of it is just like, oh yeah, but it was Fat Burger 20 years ago, or it was the first Shake Shack I had like in 2009 before they changed the recipe, and now it's not as good. Like it's always like
Context, right?
Yeah, but so it's I can't give you a great answer because it's like probably a fast food burger, but like the first time I had a Whataburger or the first time I had that I was just like, whoa, and then every time you go back, you're like, where you're just chasing the dragon, like where was that? It was so good, and now it's just not, and I can't tell if it's my brain,
I heard a theory called the pizza cognition theory a while back, which is the first slice of pizza is the best slice of pizza you'll ever eat. And you're always chasing
The
that.
law of
It's like that
diminishing
for burgers.
returns.
Yes, like the
true.
first grandma slice I ever had was like the best slice of pizza, and I've never found it again anywhere, even at the same place.
On that sad note, sorry, are there any questions from the audience? Because I feel a bit sorry now.
Yeah.
Because I can never stop at that first slice. Yes, lady at the front. I think there's a microphone coming down to you. It's coming.
So first, Kayla, I really want to thank you for your comments, because I'm from New York, but my roots go back to the 1700s in Virginia. And I actually have a brand that makes Southern preserves and condiments to bring our stuff, our chow chow, our pickled watermelon rind to a wider audience here.
What is that brand called again?
Oh, yeah.
The Garden of Eva.
Okay.
Garden of-
Thank you for the little promo. You got me. And I was thinking about what you said about barbecue, because I've become obsessed with it, because I'm going to introduce some new brands there. My family in Roanoke, Virginia, Black Mountain people, did hogs and pigs, roasting 12, 16 hours overnight, not molasses-based, not mustard-based, but vinegar mop, because that's the region in Virginia where it was the vinegar and the spices, not the mustard of North Carolina and not the molasses of Tennessee. So even like those sub-African American foodways are really worth deep exploration. And then the question that I had, because you actually didn't mention the name of the restaurant in Dallas. What's it called?
And thank you for saying that.
people
Thank you
interested.
so much for saying that. It is Smoke and Ash. Smoke and Ash, and the owners are Patrick and Fasika Hicks.
Smoking ash.
And I
Smoke.
Smoke and Ash.
Smoke
Yes.
and ash.
Smoke and ash.
Yes.
Thank you.
With an N. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Other questions? Gentleman up here?
Hello. Firstly, Tom, I love the Waffle House T-shirt.
Thank you.
It's excellent. I wanted to ask about the journey you've had selling Cajun and Creole cuisine in the UK. Firstly, on the subject of flattening cuisine, did you feel like you had to either flatten or adjust the Cajun and Creole cuisine you experienced in the US for a British audience? And as the business has grown over time, have you been able to explore a fuller version of that cuisine as the audience has got more educated on what Cajun and Creole cuisine is?
I think I've always tried to cook something that would be recognizable to somebody from Louisiana, and something that somebody would be, something that would stand up in New Orleans as well as London. I think my understanding has become richer over time. So perhaps the understanding and the technique, and I've made a hell of a lot more gumbos than I had when I first started now. So I understand it more now. But I started the business because I thought there was a massive flattening of what Cajun and Creole food was here. And I found that troubling because I thought it was such an interesting cuisine to explore with so much story behind it, that actually wanting to put out something that felt legitimate was the sort of MO for starting in the first place. I think there is more and more understanding of it. I don't know whether that is maybe me just finding more of my audience here and more people finding us. But there's I started when I very, very first started, I started at lunchtime street food markets, and you're up against a pizza and a fried chicken and a burger, and people have a very clear understanding of what that is, and I'm there trying to sell crawfish etouffee to people. And so there was a big blocker there of trying to understand or trying to get that messaging right. But then I just maybe realized that wasn't the place to sell it, and actually being able to tell more of the story was there. So yeah, I mean, in answer to the question, I've always tried, and I think, if I look back at what I was cooking 10 years ago, it's probably quite different now. But I've always tried to open up the idea of doing things right. And actually, I just did a pop-up at a restaurant in Farringdon last weekend, and I was chatting to the chef there, Nick, and sort of I was doing the briefing before the dinner and trying to explain all of the dishes to the front of house staff who had no idea about any of them. And I was like, God, there's too much information here. There's so much context to get to before you even start to broach this. And he said, have you seen The Devil Wears Prada? And I said, I don't know. I wasn't expecting this conversation after our chat. He's like, there's a scene in it with cerulean blue.
Yes.
Where they're talking about why Anne Hathaway is wearing a blue jumper, and she doesn't think that fashion's important to her, and this Anna Wintour character's like, well, this is why Versace put it on this, and you're wearing it because it's, there's this chasing the this chases down the line, and he said that's what that food is. To understand all of the history behind it, to then put something out there that's simple is important. So yeah, I think people are starting to understand more, but I also see part of the custodianship of cooking Cajun and Creole food as trying to educate people and helping for them to understand how nuanced and interesting and diverse and delicious and how much story there is behind it. So.
Have we got time for one more question? One more question. Someone back there has had their hand up for a long time. That lady there.
Thank you. That was so interesting. So many questions, but I'll just ask one. Desiree, I think I heard it years ago where you were on a radio show and they asked you about bacon, and you said that when you order it in the UK, you say burn it because it's never cooked properly. Which I love. So I guess my question is, what, if we're looking at sort of British European food specifically, what tips or tip from the way American food tends to be cooked, let's say, to keep it simple, could we take, and vice versa? So, you know, bacon being cooked
Just,
more.
yeah, please cook it. Yeah, no, that's, gosh. I mean, yeah, well, with that one, I guess it just sort of depends on your like, because when I come to bacon, I'm not looking for ham, you know, so I'm looking for, so, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, please, like, put it on the grill, like, you know, I also don't want it cold in a but like, you know, you got to take what you can get, but please cook the hell out of it, for sure. And I mean, as far as, I mean, you know, I'm a really bespoke kind of person where I'm like, because I'm lactose intolerant, I'm constantly coming across things where it's like, this didn't need cream. This didn't need milk. It didn't need cheese. Like, you could have just had good ingredients and fewer of them as opposed to trying to cover it with cheese because you know everything is under-seasoned and not well done, you know? So to me, I'm just kind of like, don't hide behind cheese, which you could make up for with skill and care, you know?
It's a great note to end on. Don't hide behind cheese. I mean, which of us has not hidden behind cheese?
I mean, look, and cheese is lovely, but like, it's not. It doesn't need to be everywhere. You could just cook the food.
Amen to that. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we didn't have time for more questions. It was just too interesting. I couldn't stop anyone mid-flow. I am so, so grateful to all of you for turning out, very particularly you, Kayla. It's been such a privilege, but thank you all. Thank you.